Uganda's government said on Monday it was banning live broadcasts of unauthorized protests and violent incidents. It comes ahead of the country's general elections as authorities detained hundreds of opposition supporters. President Yoweri Museveni is seeking to extend his 40-year rule in the January 15 vote. The 81-year-old faces a challenge by pop star turned politician Bobi Wine, who is just over half his age.
In the days before Uganda's election, the most important change did not happen on the streets. It happened on screens. Without declaring an emergency or cutting the internet, the government quietly removed something far more dangerous to power: the ability to watch unrest unfold in real time. Live broadcasts and live streams of protests, riots, and what authorities call unlawful processions were banned just as the country moved toward a high-stakes vote. This is not Uganda's first tense election, nor the first time security forces have been accused of heavy-handed tactics. President Yoweri Museveni, in power since 1986, is again facing a serious challenge from Bobi Wine, whose support base lives online and documents everything. What makes this moment different is the strategy. Instead of trying to control every protest, the state is controlling when the public is allowed to see them. And in a country where elections are decided as much by perception as by ballots, timing may decide everything. Let's get into it. Uganda elections do not explode all at once. They tighten. Pressure builds quietly, through blocked rallies, sudden arrests, and police convoys appearing without explanation. The most dangerous moments are often spontaneous. A crowd forming unexpectedly, security forces reacting too fast, a single confrontation spiraling into chaos. Those moments used to be captured live by phones and cameras, forcing the country and the world to witness events together. That shared moment has now been removed. The government's explanation was simple: live coverage could escalate tensions and spread panic. On the surface, it sounds reasonable. But elections are not destabilized by cameras. They are destabilized by what cameras reveal. The ban does not prevent confrontation. It prevents synchronization, the ability for citizens to see, process, and react to events at the same time. Without that, fear becomes private, fragmented, and easier to manage. This is why the decision landed before violence, not after it. Uganda's authorities were not responding to chaos. They were anticipating it. They understand how modern political moments form, not through newspapers the next morning, but through real-time images that ignite emotion before explanations arrive. By criminalizing live broadcasting, the state ensured that any unrest would be experienced in delay, stripped of urgency, and filtered through official language before the public could absorb it. In effect, Uganda entered the election period with two timelines: one where power acts immediately, arrests, dispersals, and force, and another where citizens receive information slowly, after the moment has passed and the meaning has been negotiated. That gap is not accidental. It is the space where control lives. This is not about journalism ethics or public order. It is about removing the one thing that turns scattered incidents into a national reckoning: shared, real-time witnessing. Once that is gone, everything else becomes arguable: numbers, responsibility, even memory itself. So if unrest breaks out and no one is allowed to see it as it unfolds, who gets to decide what really happened? The answer is simple and uncomfortable. Real time takes control away from authority and hands it to whoever is watching. When events unfold live, there is no pause button for spin, no window to prepare language, no opportunity to rename what people have already seen with their own eyes. Power depends on delay. Live footage destroys delay. This is why Uganda did not ban protests outright. Banning protests would create resistance. It would confirm fear. It would draw attention. Instead, the state targeted the moment itself. By criminalizing live broadcasts and live streams, it ensured that every confrontation would happen faster than it could be publicly understood. Arrests could occur before outrage formed. Force could be used before accountability took shape. Real-time images do something uniquely dangerous during elections. They create unity across distance. A protest in one neighborhood becomes a national event within seconds. A single act of violence becomes a shared emotional experience. That is how movements grow, not from planned speeches, but from spontaneous moments captured live. Remove that connection, and each incident stands alone. Easier to isolate, easier to dismiss. Delayed footage, by contrast, is always suspect. A video uploaded hours later can be called edited. A clip shared the next day can be described as taken out of context. Even genuine evidence loses force once it is no longer immediate. The state does not have to disprove it, it only has to question it long enough for the moment to pass. That is the advantage of time. Uganda's authorities understand this dynamic well. In past election cycles, live videos undermined official statements within minutes. Claims of riots were contradicted by footage showing peaceful crowds. Denials of violence were exposed by clips showing injuries and chaos. Those moments did not just inform the public, they set the emotional tone before the government could respond. This ban is designed to reverse that order. Now, the sequence changes. First comes action. Then comes the explanation. Then comes the debate. By the time the public reaches the last stage, the outcome has already solidified. Anger fades. Attention shifts. Urgency evaporates. Control is restored. The government framed the ban as a way to prevent panic. But panic does not spread because people see events. It spreads when people sense that something is being hidden. What the ban actually prevents is immediacy, because immediacy makes lies expensive. When everyone sees the same thing at the same time, contradictions collapse instantly. In elections, whoever controls timing controls perception. Uganda's leadership has not silenced the country. It has slowed it down. And in that slowdown, power gains room to breathe, act, and settle outcomes before the public can catch up. But why was it necessary to deploy this strategy now, before a single vote was cast? Because the last time Uganda voted, the story escaped control. Not through speeches or court filings, but through chaos caught in motion. In the previous election cycle, the state believed it could manage tension the old way, through force, arrests, and firm messaging. What it did not fully account for was how fast reality could travel once cameras were already rolling. When security forces moved against opposition supporters, the world did not wait for official summaries. Phones were already live. Shots were heard in real time. People running, bleeding, screaming. These moments were not reconstructed later. They were witnessed as they happened. By the time statements were issued describing riots and disorder, the emotional verdict had already been reached elsewhere. More than 50 people lost their lives in those crackdowns. That number alone was damaging, but what truly unsettled the system was how the deaths became known. They were not introduced gently through reports or press briefings. They arrived raw, unfiltered, and immediate. Each clip made it harder to compress events into a single official narrative. Each livestream shortened the distance between state action and global scrutiny. That election taught a lesson no internal memo could ignore. Violence is manageable. Visibility is not. Force can be deployed quietly. Arrests can be explained away. But live images lock power into the moment it acts. They prevent retroactive justification. They deny authorities the chance to slow the public down. This is why the current ban is not reactive, it is preventative. Uganda's leadership is not responding to unrest, it is responding to memory. It remembers how quickly the narrative slipped away last time. It remembers how difficult it was to put the story back in its box once people had already seen too much. The calculation now is different. If confrontations happen, they must happen without a shared audience. If force is used, it must be processed privately before becoming public. If deaths occur, they must enter the conversation late, when outrage is weaker and attention is divided. This is how systems adapt, not by changing behavior, but by changing exposure. The events themselves may look familiar to those on the ground, but their national impact depends entirely on timing. Delay drains urgency. Distance dulls anger. And without live witnessing, even serious incidents struggle to cohere into a single political moment. So the ban exists because the last election proved something dangerous: that real-time truth can outrun authority. This time, the state intends to stay ahead of the story by slowing it down before it begins. But whose visibility had become so powerful that it needed to be cut off before the campaign even reached its climax? Let's pause for a second to say big thank you to the Black Culture Diary community, where Black voices, stories, and legacies are preserved and amplified. By becoming a member, you're not just supporting the channel, you're becoming part of a powerful cultural movement. Let's continue. The visibility that alarmed the state belongs to a movement that does not depend on newspapers, state broadcasters, or official platforms. It belongs to the opposition base built around Bobi Wine, a movement that learned early that survival depends on documentation. Phones are not accessories in this space, they are shields. Live streams are not entertainment, they are evidence. Unlike traditional opposition figures who relied on rallies and press conferences, this movement grew inside Uganda's digital bloodstream. Arrests were filmed, blocked roads were streamed, police raids were shown as they unfolded. Supporters understood something fundamental. If an incident is seen live, it cannot be quietly buried. If it is delayed, it becomes debatable. That understanding turned cameras into political tools. This is why the ban hits asymmetrically. The ruling establishment does not rely on spontaneous visibility. Its power is institutional, slow-moving, and protected by official channels. But the opposition's strength lies in speed and exposure. It turns isolated encounters into national moments before they can be contained. That is precisely what the ban disrupts. The challenge posed by this movement is not numerical, it is perceptual. It forces the state into reaction rather than narration. When supporters go live, the government no longer speaks first, it responds. And responding is always weaker than defining the moment from the start. This becomes especially dangerous for a leader like Yoweri Museveni, whose rule stretches back to 1986. Longevity brings experience, but it also brings rigidity. Systems built over decades are designed to manage institutions, not viral moments. A single live stream can collapse years of carefully managed image building in minutes. The ban, then, is not about preventing unrest. It is about preventing momentum. Movements do not surge because people are angry. They surge because people see others being angry at the same time. Remove that simultaneity and outrage fragments. One arrest feels personal instead of political. One beating feels isolated instead of symbolic. What remains is fear without amplification. And fear without amplification is easier to control. This also explains why the ban arrives alongside intensified pressure on opposition supporters. When arrests happen quietly, when intimidation occurs off-camera, when rallies are disrupted before phones can go live, the opposition loses its most effective defense: exposure. Power no longer has to deny abuse. It only has to ensure it is not witnessed in the moment. This is how modern repression works, not through absolute silence, but through delayed truth. The movement is not erased. It is slowed until its emotional force dissipates. But what happens on the ground when pressure increases and there are no live cameras left to hold it in check? Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. It turns into something quieter, heavier, and far more dangerous. Repression that does not need to explain itself. When live cameras disappear, power no longer has to perform restraint. It only has to act efficiently. This is where Uganda is now. Away from the screens, security operations have intensified. Hundreds of opposition supporters have been detained in the run-up to the vote. Many were picked up not at rallies but at homes, on roads, or in small gatherings that never made headlines. Without live footage, these arrests do not become moments. They become statistics, if they are counted at all. Human rights groups have filled some of the silence. Amnesty International has described a brutal campaign of repression unfolding ahead of the election, detailing arbitrary arrests, beatings, and torture of opposition supporters. These are not allegations made in the heat of protest. They are documented patterns reported after the fact. But reports arrive late. They are read slowly. They do not shock the way a live image does. This is the environment the broadcast ban creates, a gap between action and awareness. Security forces can move decisively, knowing that any evidence will surface later, when urgency has faded and public attention has shifted. Even when abuses are eventually confirmed, the political damage is limited because the emotional peak has already passed. The situation of Kizza Besigye illustrates this perfectly. Once the most prominent challenger to the presidency, he has remained in prison for more than a year on treason charges he denies. His detention no longer dominates the political conversation, not because it is insignificant, but because it has become static. Without constant visibility, Even the imprisonment of a major opposition figure fades into background noise. This is how prolonged control works. Not through constant spectacle, but through normalization. Arrests become routine. Detentions lose urgency. Fear spreads privately instead of collectively. People calculate risk individually rather than moving together. Live cameras interrupt that process. They turn routine repression into a crisis. They force decisions into the open, remove them, and pressure can build steadily without triggering a single defining moment. The broadcast ban, then, is not just about the media. It is about insulating force from consequence. It allows the state to apply pressure incrementally, confident that no single action will ignite nationwide outrage in real time. And when fear is individualized and truth arrives late, resistance weakens without ever being formally crushed. So when Election Day finally arrives under these conditions, what kind of outcome does delayed truth actually protect? It protects the kind of outcome that does not need to be defended loudly, only settled quickly. When Election Day arrives under these conditions, the vote happens in public. But everything that gives the vote meaning happens out of sight. People line up, ballots are cast, results are announced, and whatever unrest, resistance, or force accompanies that process is experienced late, in pieces, and without the urgency required to change anything. This is the final function of the broadcast ban. It separates decision from reaction. By the time citizens, courts, or the international community begin debating what happened, the political reality has already hardened. Winners are sworn in. Institutions move forward. Attention drifts. The moment where pressure could have altered the course is gone. Delayed truth does not need to be false to be ineffective. Even accurate information loses power when it arrives after outcomes are locked in. A report published days later cannot mobilize crowds the way a live stream can. A confirmed abuse documented weeks later cannot rewind an election. The system does not rely on erasing evidence. It relies on exhausting it. This is why the ban matters more than any single arrest or clash. It reshapes the entire rhythm of political accountability. Instead of events producing immediate consequences, consequences are postponed until they no longer threaten stability. Outrage becomes academic. Grief becomes statistical. Responsibility becomes blurred. The election then becomes less about persuasion and more about endurance. Those in power only need to hold the line long enough for time to do the rest. Silence does not have to be absolute. It only has to be timely. And this is what makes the move so effective and so dangerous. It does not announce itself as repression. It presents itself as an order. It does not look like panic. It looks like preparation. By the time people realize what has been lost, the shared present, the ability to witness together, it is already too late to recover it. Uganda's election will be counted, certified, and archived. But the moments that defined it may never exist as moments at all, only as delayed fragments, argued over long after their political weight has evaporated. That is not an accident. It is designed. Because when power controls not just what happens, but when it is allowed to be seen, it no longer needs to win the argument. It only needs to win the clock. If democracy depends on citizens witnessing their own political reality in real time, what remains when that time is taken away? Let us know in the comments section what is going to happen now. Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it.